This is the last TikTok I'm gonna make about it because I've been doing it my whole life and it's exhausting. Stop pretending you're an advocate for me, you're not. We shouldn't have to lock our door to stop people from robbing us. We shouldn't have to give our daughters tasers to make sure they can protect themselves when they walk home from school. We shouldn't have to take our headphones out when we jog to make sure we can hear footsteps behind us. We shouldn't be afraid to walk through dark alleys thinking that we're gonna get snatched. But we do. Now that we've acknowledged the reality, let's move on. You will not stand in front of me and protect me from objectification. You cannot stop any human being when they look at me from sexualizing me. You're not going to walk next to me like a security guard my entire life and stop a man from touching me. You don't own the internet. If I come on here and show my face today, a man could put it on Pornhub if he wanted to. He could screenshot a video of my body and just enjoy himself to it free of charge. Telling me that I shouldn't have to protect myself from harm doesn't help me. Demonizing my religion for acknowledging the harm I can face in society as a woman doesn't help. Policing my right to refuse the effects of the patriarchy misogyny isn't feminist.
What's happening in Texas is exactly why it's so f***ing insulting that you think disabled people do not care about climate change simply because we need straws to survive. Constantly talk about how disabled people are left behind in emergency situations. This is a prime example. There are people that are attached to ventilators and oxygen who do not have power and are running on reserves or are rationing it so they can survive what's happening. Disabled people are the most vulnerable to climate change and most likely to die and be left behind in emergency situations. This is not a joke. And lastly, all of those little tips you like to give to people to prepare for an emergency situation, a lot of them are not logistically or financially possible for disabled people. You want us to have 90 days worth of prescriptions? Where are people supposed to get that? And for half of you hearing this, you have no problem with any of what I just said at all. And that's the problem.
TikTok beef of the week. Let's get into it, y'all. So she popped up on my For You page and she was saying racist and transphobic things, and then her account got taken down, but not before this video was saved.
Sorry, I'm not going to apologize for it. If God made you a boy, then you're a boy. If God made you a girl, then you're a girl. Period. There is no ifs, ands, or buts. None. 2. I'm going to say the N-word if I want to say the N-word. You're not going to sit here and tell me I can't. I don't believe the N-word is a racial term, and that's my beliefs. I believe if you participate in activities that an N-word does, then I'm going to call you that whether.
And since that account is now gone, nobody's been able to hold her accountable for what she did or what she said. So let's do that. This is her new TikTok, her Instagram account, Facebook account, college information, and the Dean of Students information. It's okay to have your own opinions, that's fine. But you can't get on this app and say whatever you want to be disrespectful and expect people not to hold you accountable.
All right, kids, say it with me. Freedom of speech is not freedom of social consequence. The government may protect you from saying dumb shit, but I won't. I'll beat the fuck out.
Anytime you try and have a conversation about black rights, someone is bound to say,
well, despite making up only 13% of the population, black people commit 50% of the crime!
First of all, if you look at arrest records, you'll quickly see that black people do not commit 50% of the crime. Black people do make up 13% of the population, and they do disproportionately commit homicides and robberies. But why is this? The majority of these homicides and robberies are gang-related. The reason black communities have more gang violence can be attributed to a series of socioeconomic circumstances like systemic racism and the war on drugs. So it's not like black people just commit more crime across the board. I'm sick of this dishonest statistic being used to justify racism.
Racism does not exist. It's a survival mechanism for white people. Hear me out.
I'm not hearing you out. You're a grown man acting like this. Come on now, let's get it together. Keep up with me. The very first sentence of that video was already fallacious. Racism does not exist. It's a survival mechanism for white people. So wait, racism doesn't exist, but white people still use it. How can white people use something for survival if that thing doesn't exist? How do you miss in the very first 2 seconds of that video? Go on to say the following. Parents of the white girls that I dated in high school didn't hate me because I was black. They hated the fact that the child I would have with their daughter would be black. Okay, so they don't hate the color of your skin, they hate the color of your child's skin. Tell me what's the difference. You want to give a new name? We can give it a new name. It goes on to say how melanin is genetically dominant. It's only partially true, but I won't get into that. The bigger problem is the fact that you assume that the presence of melanin is somehow the determining factor of race, when that simply just isn't true. Plenty of members of another race that have skin just as dark as me. I'm cringing at the fact that you think that race is so contingent on biology. biology, and that simply just isn't true. Race is how you're perceived in society. So it's not that blackness is genetically dominant, it's socially dominant. And that's because of white people, not genetic. Black features were considered undesirable. One drop rule stated if you had one drop of black blood, you were considered black. Plessy versus Ferguson said if you had one black grandparent, you were considered black. To have as many oppressed people as possible.
If you can't live without something, it should be free. Simple as that. Water.
I already know how people are gonna respond to this. You stupid kid, not everything can be free. Somebody's gotta make it. Not everything in life is free, commie. But you need to understand we're already paying for the labor that goes into making these things. But then on top of that, you also have to pay for the profit of some guy who didn't actually make the thing you're buying. Take medicine, for example. The pharmaceutical companies make trillions of dollars in profits. Spend millions of dollars lobbying politicians. So when you go to Walgreens and you buy some medicine, only a fraction of the amount of money you pay for that medicine is going to be used in the production process of medicine. And a huge chunk of it will be going to lobbying the government to make sure that they never lower the price of medicine. This is why we should nationalize all the major industries and transition to a socialist mode of production, where basic necessities are free. And if you own a pharmaceutical company, you go work in a mine or something, I don't care.
My sister, come close. Come close to me. Keep your mouth shut. It helps a lot. I love you.
That shit was funny. Bro, I ain't gonna lie, you a funny ass nigga, bro. You goofy, right? You funny, nigga. Shut the fuck up. You not funny, nigga. The fuck up.
Just like one of these meals would completely drain the average person's life savings. But yeah, just travel. Come on, you know the vibes. We're just casually going to Dubai. Not a big deal.
If you're homophobic, you may actually be gay, according to science. So scientists out of the University of Georgia got two groups of heterosexual men, half who identified as homophobic and half who said they weren't homophobic. The men were exposed to sexually explicit erotic stimuli, porn in layperson's terms. 3 types of porn actually, heterosexual, gay, and lesbian. And only the homophobes showed it in it. The homophobes got boners. And the study concluded that homophobia is associated with homosexual arousal and that the homophobic individual is either unaware or denies their feelings.
Monoculture. One race, one language, one way of life. Monoculture requires violent methods of removal, which include environmental destruction, genocide, incarceration, and involuntary sterilization of disabled peoples. We will go into detail how Black and Indigenous and people of color are the main targets of removal. Monoculture requires the establishment of a status quo, a supremacy ending ever despite diversity in human populations. The status quo is maintained via the ideology of the isms, which are arbitrary in nature, but we've come to accept them and weaponize them as part of functioning society. This infighting and bias is backed by the medical industrial complex, the military and prison industrial complex, school to prison pipeline, and scientific fields whose interests crisscross with capitalism or maintaining the status quo. Hence why all of these institutions are inherently biased and problematic, and why terms like abolition and defense exist. Capitalism is doing exactly what it's supposed to do, turnover, maximum profit. The establishment of the status quo or an elite ensures profit and privilege to those who belong to the majority at the expense of minorities.
No matter how much we talk about like political imperialism as well as like Western supremacy, a lot of people still miss it when it's happening. Every century, Westerners revamp an ideology that other civilizations have been practicing for thousands of years, and they slap a nice academic name on it and then start to hold other people accountable for ascribing to it. And when you don't, they begin to demonize you. This is because the West doesn't just imperialize by invading people's countries and stealing their oil and starting wars. They don't just imperialize by putting a military base in 70% of the world. They do it with philosophy and art and education and science and medicine. The West believes everything that comes from the West is superior to anything that comes from the rest of the world. Every other culture is inferior to the culture of the white man. This applies to so many things, but especially neoliberal feminism. So much so that if your beliefs do not align with theirs, then they're archaic, obsolete, and misogynistic.
If women's bodies were made out of glass, there would be way less abortions.
I wrote a poem. Women's bodies only matter when there's men inside. Extract them and make her shatter, execute her pride. Men will mangle her to mother, men make no mistake. Women's bodies only matter when they're prone to break. If the blossoming missile blooms to be a lass, how will we explain to her that she is only glass? Women's bodies only matter when they can be hurled. Genitals are only latter when they're not yet girls. Men will make her maternal or men will win her worth. Virtue is a victory unless she can give birth. Women's bodies only matter when they're fit to burst. Fritter for their kicking batter, cooking up her hearse. Ignore the ceilings, all the feelings, for they feel I must ask. When did we stop saying women and start saying glass? Women's bodies only matter when they're on display. Flowers float about their hat and stems stab guts like prey. Women made of any mass must remain credential. Wombs are not what create glass, nor are they essential. Oh wow, I did that really fast.
Listen, I don't really care. This couple can do what they want. Just don't act like this is an example of maturity rather than white privilege. At the end of the day, she's a white girl. She can afford to date someone who has different political views. Again, I don't really care what they do, but just don't use this as an opportunity to make people of color feel like they're crazy because they don't want to be friends with or date people who don't believe in their basic human rights.
Normalize invalidating white women's insecurities, specifically when they think they have a say when black people are discussing theirs. Exhibit A. As a dark-skinned woman in America, I'm finding it very hard to love myself and just make my way through this whole self-love journey. Same, I get so pale in the winter, it's not even funny. Exhibit B. Yeah, and I just find it really fucked up how no one appreciates 4C hair unless it's super long or super thick or super this or super that. Yeah, people only like blondes, and here I am, just a brunette. Exhibit C. I just find it crazy how features like my nose and my lips have been like demonized by society, and all of a sudden, now that white women think big lips are cute, it's normalized and it's wanted, like it's a good thing now. I feel you, because just a few years ago, people were saying my freckles made me look dirty, and now everyone's putting like the fake freckles. I get you, sis. I get you, sis. See what I'm saying? Black people have a whole societal beauty standard instilling these insecurities. So don't call me crazy when I say
the Green New Deal has come, believe it or not, to the state of Texas.
False. The Green New Deal is still just an idea. It hasn't gone into effect anywhere.
Politicians took the fashionable route and became recklessly reliant on so-called alternative energy, meaning windmills.
80% of the power grid in Texas comes from gas, coal, and nuclear.
So it was all working great until the day it got cold outside. The windmills failed, like the silly fashion accessories they are, and people in Texas died.
Republicans in Texas rejected having wind turbines that were winterized because it would save money and increase profits.
Green energy inevitably means blackout.
The rolling blackouts were because the cold weather froze the gas inside the pipeline.
So what do they mean for you? Well, they mean higher energy prices for starters.
Renewable energy is now the cheapest option. Look, the reason Texas is in this mess is because they have an isolated power grid to avoid federal regulations because it saves them money and increases profits. It wasn't the wind turbines, Tucker. It's what happens when unfettered capitalism meets climate change.
We had to make our butts disappear entirely.
So I've seen some commentary about that video, but it feels like people are kind of missing the fact that white women hated the idea of being compared to a black woman and having quote unquote black features like a fat ass. They were disgusted by that. So Sir Mix-a-Lot, Baby Got Back came out in 1992, and in the video is a white woman talking about a black model and saying that only rappers like her because she looks like a prostitute and that her butt is so big and that she's just so black. A lot of white women during the 2000s had that same mindset about having a big ass and about black women. Having a big ass was absolutely stigmatized then. If you were to ask white women who had big butts then, they would say how white men would not date them because of their ass. So while white women were stigmatized for having a big ass, black women were hypersexualized. That's why in the song, the model was called a prostitute. The hatred in a big butt during the 2000s is rooted in misogynoir, fat phobia, and anti-blackness.
Okay, so here's something I don't think people are getting about racism. And yes, I'm very bothered right now because I saw this tweet and it was oh, so now we're saying standardized testing is racist? And when I talk about food deserts and how they affect mainly people of color, I got so many racist slurs thrown at me, so many attacks on my intellect, because it's not racist, it's classist. Black people always want to claim the victim. Let's break a few things down about the American racism of today. Yes, I can drink whatever water fountain I want. Date a white person. Go to a white school. And you know why? Because of legislation. And we want to take that as some big win, right? But legislation does not fix ideology. You think Lyndon B. Johnson wasn't racist? Abraham Lincoln wasn't racist? Legislation also doesn't automatically dismantle years of racism. Hundreds of them, by the way. There is a system that is in place and working as it's designed. And the people with those same ideals are still in power. There's a difference between claiming the victim and calling attention to something.
Nah, I was telling if you really bad it, go ahead and do it. Stop acting scared. Why'd you stop talking? What? Bro. Just keep speaking in your full blackness. Just keep doing you, bro. This is a safe place. Just say it a little bit louder.
In the United States, adults view black girls as less innocent and more adult-like than their white peers starting as young as 5 years old. This is known as adultification bias. A groundbreaking study by Georgetown Law Center on poverty and inequality found that adults believe black girls need less nurturing, less protection, less support, and less comforting. And related studies show that black girls are punished at a disproportionate rate in schools and the juvenile justice system. These statistics reveal an alarming reality. But do they reflect the experiences of black girls and women? We conducted focus groups across the country to hear about their lived experiences. They told us that black girls often face higher standards.
I feel like you cannot make mistakes as a black girl.
History's most commonly perpetuated myths, let's go.
The American colonists were petulant children. Please don't leave me. So the narrative pitched in every American school is that the American colonists were these brave warriors who fought against oppressors, but in reality, Britain wasn't really all that oppressive. Initially, the colonists refused to pay taxes to Britain, and Britain was like, fine. Yeah, okay, that's your deal. The colonists are also the ones who initiated the French and Indian War because they wanted the Ohio River Valley, and Britain was like, no, you have your land, that's their land, you can't have that, and the colonists went to war anyway. And once that was over, that was when Parliament jacked up the tax on tea. Now keep in mind, this is the only tax that they intended on collecting. They still had no intention of enforcing any of the other taxes that they had levied prior to this. They just wanted to make some money back to pay for the costs of the war that the colonists started without their permission, and the colonists flipped the fuck out. And I am nowhere near finished. Part 2 coming soon.
One time this white man really angrily DM'd me in response to a video I made about the dog eating stereotype, and he was like, stop covering up for your culture, your people do eat dog. And I was like, no, dog eating is not a part of traditional Chinese culture. That was something that was sensationalized by the West. And he tried to white-splain my own culture to me, and he was like, no, dog eating goes back to 1700 BCE in ancient Chinese folklore. 1700 BCE? We are in the 21st century. But see, this is what Orientalism does. It sees POC as governed by ancient traditions and exotic backwards ways of life. They do this in the Western media all the time. Whenever they talk about China's COVID response, they talk about the mandate of heaven and Confucianism, which goes back 3,000 years. Imagine if you talked about Europe's COVID response and brought up the divine rights of kings. While white people are seen as enlightened enough to be complex individuals and separate from the history of their ancestors, the history of POC is always reduced to stereotypes.
You actually want to kill racism, shouldn't it be to where either one, no one can...
Oh, had to stop you there because it sounded for a second like you were trying to teach black people on how to kill an ideology that white people created. Let's say great-granddaddy white had a rock. And every time he saw great-granddaddy black, great-granddaddy white would chuck this rock at him as hard as fucking possible. One day, great-granddaddy black got tired of it and took the rock and kept it. This rock was passed down for generations. He taught his kids to only play with it in friendly manners because it was used to abuse him. And the lineage of great-granddaddy white saw the lineage of great-granddaddy black enjoying this rock that their great-granddaddy had used to abuse them and decided that they wanted it back. Knowing the history of abuse that came from this rock when it was in the hands of great-granddaddy white's family, would you give it back?
I already know there's going to be some hate under my last video. Let me make something abundantly clear, please. When we say we are taking back a word, when we say we are reclaiming the power a word holds, let's be clear about what that means, okay? This word was used to strike bone-chilling fear into black people. When a black person heard this word out of a white mouth, it meant death. It meant a lynching. It meant torture. It meant, at the very least, legal prosecution. That is the power white people had with this word. So let's say we give that power to black people now. What does that look like? While yes, it can mean using this word endearingly to black people, it also means that white people fear using it. The goal is white people fear for their lives when they use it. If you're in the hood and you use this shit, you should fear for your life. The goal of my last video is just for you to fear for your job. That's the least you can do.
Yeah, so I'm gonna play devil's advocate really quickly. Yes, that's a great point. I'm actually gonna be the devil's avocado for a second. Okay, so allow me to be the devil's astronaut really fast. Yeah, but I'm gonna be the devil's acorn really quickly. So I'm just gonna piggyback off of Kelly and be the devil's apple bottom jeans. So I'm actually at the devil's apartment, and
the hardest part about moving out of your parents' house or moving to a new location is having no guidance on how to budget for it. Here's what I wish someone taught me before moving out. First, make 3 sections for expenses before the move, during, and after the move. Then, underneath each section, write down 3 things you absolutely need to pay for. I wrote down some of mine that you can use for yourself. Then write down the estimated costs of each one. Food is $50 for the first week, and also don't forget toiletries. You can label this as planned budget and compare it to actual after you're done moving.
If you're looking at Texas right now and thinking, it seems pretty bad that a state's electrical grid can fail overnight from a snowstorm, I have news for you. It's so much worse than you could ever imagine. Don't be a heartless idiot and blame red state voters. It's red states, blue states, purple states, green states, everywhere is in crisis. In 2017, the American Society of Civil Engineers gave our energy grid a D+, because almost all of it was built in the 1950s and 60s with a 50-year life expectancy, and we're 10 to 20 years past that. Across the country, 640,000 miles of high voltage lines run at full capacity at almost all times, which is way more than the grid was designed to handle, and Texas in particular is one of the worst ratios between planned and real capacity. It's so bad that the US government has said that if just 9 of America's 55,000 electrical substations were brought down, it could cause a coast-to-coast blackout lasting 18 months or more. And testimony from the executive director of Task Force on National and Homeland Security has said a prolonged collapse of the electrical grid could result in the death of up to 90% of the American population. Today, the US has more power outages than any other developed country, and that's because 68% of the electricity in the US is managed by investor-owned privatized utility companies, and updating their systems cuts into their profits so they don't do anything until something fails. And when things do fail, and for example start massive wildfires in California, guess who pays for it? Mostly taxpayers. There's no good news, and that's just the tip of the iceberg, because all of America's infrastructure is failing, so I'm gonna keep doing videos about it.
With the news today that Candace Owens is considering running for president in 2024, I'd like to remind everyone that she failed on the most easy question a politician will ever get. And that is, how do you feel about Adolf Hitler's policies?
Whenever we say nationalism, the first thing people think about, at least in America, is Hitler. You know, he was a National Socialist, but if Hitler just wanted to make Germany great and have things run well, okay, fine. The problem is that he had dreams outside of Germany. He wanted to globalize. He wanted everybody to be German, everybody to be speaking German, everybody to look a different way. That's not, to me, that's not nationalism.
You heard that right. According to Candace Owens, if Hitler had just kept his genocide inside Germany, he would have been fine. The big problem is he wanted to expand all over the world.
Even with an ice storm freezing everything in its path, black people are still not safe from the police. This is 18-year-old Rodney Reese, and Plano police arrested him last week during an ice storm for walking in the middle of the street on his way home from work. Let's take a look at the video.
Are you trying to get home? You sure? You need a ride somewhere? Hey, look, we just want to make sure you're all right. We just want to make sure you're all right.
Now, Rodney was arrested just houses away from where he lives with his mother, and the charges have since been dropped against him for walking in the middle of the street. But listen to this.
As he was walking along the street because the area off to the side of it, seen in this photo taken the next day, was covered in ice and snow.
The chief of police said the following.
Those officers did not know his age. They didn't know he was 18. They didn't know he worked at Walmart. They didn't know where he lived.
Okay, chief, so I guess the only thing they did know is that he was black.
I don't like Joe Biden. I'm a communist. I'm just saying.
Oh, so why don't you go move to Venezuela?
Oh, no. Okay. So, Venezuela is not communist.
Yes, it is.
No, it's
not. Why
not.
don't you go move to Cuba?
Okay, dude. I just want you to do one thing for me. Can you define communism?
Well, communism is obviously the type of society where government tends to have more control over funds and people get equal pay. But at the same time, though, it also means the government tends to be more controlling.
Okay.
I think there should be about 5 white men hoarding the wealth.
I think 5-10 men and women should hoard all the wealth. Maybe some queer and trans folks too.
I think we should bomb any country that disagrees with us.
I think we should bomb any country that disagrees with us, but only after we starve all the children with sanctions, and the bombs should maybe be pink.
And in regards to COVID, we should just open up the schools.
No, we should open up all the schools.
Viola Davis did an interview where she talked about how she's constantly rejected from jobs because she doesn't look conventionally attractive enough, as in she doesn't have Eurocentric features. Conversely, Kylie Jenner went and got lip fillers, proceeded to make a lip line that she turned into a makeup line that she turned into a skincare line. The same lips that keep Viola Davis out of a job, Kylie Jenner bought and made $1 million. That is the problem.
A black person should look like is rooted in white supremacy.
So I saved this video a while ago because I wanted to respond to this person. The video now is deleted, so I will just summarize what she said. She basically said that people are attacking her for being a biracial woman because she doesn't look like the typical black person. And to her, a typical black person has a big nose, big lips, and dark skin, and doesn't always have 4C hair. And yesterday, from another creator, come to find out that she isn't even a biracial person. Now, the question I have to her and many other white people on this platform and other platforms is this. Why do you guys feel the need to insert yourself into communities that you have terrorized and marginalized for years and years? For a long time, you deemed our people to be inferior, and now you wear our skin, our culture, and our personalities as costumes, and it just doesn't really make sense to me at all. I'd like to understand. Okay, this video, let's address it. No American soldier has fought for freedom since World War II, and even then it was not specifically for American rights. Recent generations that have served have fought for lobbyist America, imperialism, and oil rights and dictation. American rights specified for white people have been solidified in the Constitution since 1787. When constitutional rights were implemented, so was the 3/5 Compromise, which categorized black people as 3/5 of human. Therefore, they were exempt from exercising any and all amendments in so-called human rights. Because of the civil rights movement, I have room to exercise the amendments, but not without racially motivated threat. You should also understand that America is very literally not the best country in the world. America is the 53rd freest country in the world. The most prominent things that we rank first in globally is mass shootings, the incarcerated population, obesity rates, and statistically being the most racist country in the world. With that being said, I don't respect America, nor the flag, nor the military. Yes, the video was disrespectful, that was the point. The white American population thrives in the hands of respect throughout our history and to today. I'm not sorry.
Guys see a girl wearing makeup and they say one wipe and it's all over. Why don't you wipe your ass? Huh? What about those skin marks? Take care of those first. One wipe? I don't think so. Wipe again.
Black men are the white people of black people. We are the entitled, largely uneducated, flamboyantly problematic group that offers that everyone else is the problem but us. We think that we should be the leaders of the black community without actually taking responsibility for negative things that happen within the black community. We offer that it is everyone else's fault that things don't work but ours. It's society not respecting the black man. It's the black woman not respecting the black man. It's the feminization of the black man. It's the masculinization of the black woman. It is the black woman choosing the wrong black man. It's the LGBTQ plus community trying to indoctrinate the black man. Everybody else's fault but ours. And if anyone steps outside the pocket to remind us in any way, shape, or form that we might be able to do better, then they're bashing black men. And don't get me wrong, things are hard for us as black men, but that doesn't give us the right to pretend like things aren't hard for other people. Like we don't make things hard for other people. That's what white people do.